Good morning, mattphilleo here in the studio in Eau Claire, Wisconsin at the Artisan Forge Studios building. I just want to show you today a painting I'm working on of the Loaves and Fishes. I did this painting before in a realistic style using the glazing technique, but today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to branch out a little bit and do this in a little more impressionistic style. Maybe considered more painterly, with bigger brush strokes and thicker paint, and a little bit faster in speed of painting. So I'd just like to invite you to watch the process. This will be kind of a learning experience for me. I haven't done a whole lot in this style. But again, I'm going to be painting this picture of the loaves and fishes. So this is going to be for a book cover illustration. Where the publisher wanted something a little more painterly with that kind of style, something kind of modern. And I'm going to be doing the painting from this photo that I took of the loaves and fishes. So let's switch over to the other camera and we'll get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tone the background. And what I want to do is think of a color that's kind of similar to the overall tone in this picture. And there's some green in there with the grasses, but there's also some dirt showing through as well. And so with that, I would like to use something a little more earth tone, especially since I have that as well within the basket and then in the loaves. So I'm going to take some raw umber dark and a little bit of raw sienna and generous portion of white so that it covers. Use some matte medium to make it more fluid, but this is not going to be painted in the usual glazing technique. But again, a little more impressionistically. So we're just going to cover over canvas with a ground, is what they call it, to tone the background. Take a little more white. We'll just mix this together again with the raw sienna and the raw umber dark, and some more white. And a little more medium to thin that out. We'll just, again, continue this right across and then blend into what we had previously on there and extend this just using vertical strokes all the way across. And maybe in a few different directions as well. Just have a little fun with it. And maybe I'll thin it out a little bit with some of the medium. Just make it interesting that way, so it's not completely opaque. Just want to get this covered as nicely as I can. Normally I work in a much more conservative technique where I'm using very light glazes of color over time, but with this, try something a little different and see how it works. Sometimes it's a little fun just to try some different techniques, see what you get. And I don't want to overbrush this. And then I'll just let that dry a little here in that part. Pull that out. And we'll just let that dry. All right. And I will pause this and let it, we'll come back after it's dry. Okay, and so now it's dry. And I'm sorry about the little moire pattern that you see on your video, these little blue lines. they're actually not on the canvas, but there must be some sort of a texture that's reacting digitally with what the camera sees. So sure, after I put some details on here, that'll disappear. But anyhow, I am going to freehand sketch with paint just the overall basket and the fish. And to do that, I'm going to take some raw umber dark, mix it into the tone that I already have. Something that's a little bit darker. Maybe we'll get a little more paint on there just to give me something more to work with. Medium to make it very fluid. And we'll just kind of say sketch this in. And see how that color is. It's just a little bit darker, but that should work. And that's what we want, just dark enough to see. And I'll just start playing around with it, seeing where I want to put the basket and all of that stuff. Might be a little hard to see it on your end, but I can see it on mine. It's very faint. Gives me the ability to kind of block it in and change it as I need to. At this point, I don't care if I have a lot of texture on here, because that's kind of the look we're going for. And I don't want to have this too centered up. That's always a tendency to want to do that. Make sure I leave a little gap so that it's not precisely centered. Makes it more of an interesting composition when you can have it slightly off center. So we'll do that. And we'll just get the shape of the top end of the handle of the basket. Something like this. Just using a series of short little paint strokes to kind of figure out where I want to put it. It doesn't have to be exactly like the picture, but just get the feeling of it in there. That's all we want, just to have the overall feeling. Okay. And just to make sure that they're not precisely same distance, I like to have this part a little lower than the upper part. So the whole weight of the basket is quite a bit lower. So change that a little bit so I kind of see where the distance is. In other words, I don't want the same distance from top to bottom. I'd like this to be a little closer to the bottom, have a little more room on the top. And visually, I think that just looks a little better. Kind of leads your eye right into it. So we'll do this, kind of sketch in the outline of the towel. And this won't be quite as precise, but it's not what we're going for here. Let's get those fish in there and kind of suggest where they might be at. And then the flatbread. The edge of the towel, maybe something like this. Always refine it as I go along. Maybe I'll go in and also get the edges of the flatbread itself. And I have several lines here, some that I like more than others. That's all right. I just kind of stick with the ones I like the best. And we'll leave the rest in there. It's getting a little thicker with paint than what I'm used to, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. I'll just let the texture be right in there. We'll go with that. Okay. Now that I have this kind of blocked in here, I'll go ahead and let it dry, and then we'll start blocking in some of the other colors and the background and get some differentiation here in the sketch. Okay, now I have that mostly dry. And what I'm going to do now is block in some values in the background. And to do that, we will mix some, let's see, a mixture of phthalo blue I have and ultramarine blue. And we'll mix into that some yellow ochre, some white, make it opaque enough, and a little raw sienna and yellow ochre. And let's kind of mix it into this tone we have so it's not too intense right away, because we do have some different colors going on. There's texture of the ground as well. Could easily get carried away with this. But some different textures, a little brown maybe. And I'll just kind of match it up to what I see in the picture, see if I'm in the ballpark. Making something that's a little muddy looking, but not too muddy. And we'll just go over into the background with this. Just block it right in. Just leaving that area alone for the handle of the basket. I tell you what, let's get a little more raw sienna, white. We'll go in with that and just kind of change the color a little bit as we go along. Just block it right as close as we can. Little bit of yellow ochre, some white. A little medium to make it more fluid. And let's add a little more yellow ochre, raw sienna to it. In a couple different areas. Maybe a little bit of raw umber dark. And just kind of play around with it. Get some different textures and colors in there. I just don't want it to be all one color. maybe even just a touch of burnt sienna. Just give it a little different flavor. We'll just see what happens with this. Say it's a whole different style for me, but we'll have fun with this and just play around with it. Do a little wet on wet blending here. A little cooler colors just in certain areas. And just spread this around. Imagine we have a few pockets of grass and trees and different things. Well, not trees, but leaves and weeds growing up out of the ground. And let's block in down here a little bit as well. I'll use a darker color for that. A little more medium to make the paint cover better. Just cut up to the area where I kind of have it sketched in. Some different brush strokes in there. Kind of fade it up to the lighter color over here. There we go. And yeah, I want to make sure it's not exactly centered. So that's important. All right, so we'll let that dry and then we'll see what happens after that. And by the way, this is acrylic on canvas board, 12 by 16. And so with that, we do have to let the paint dry a little bit. But while it's drying, I'm going to go into some of the colors here on the towel or whatever it is around the basket. And so for that, I'm going to take some white and a little bit of this phthalo blue, ultramarine blue mix. Tone it down with a little bit of raw umber dark. We'll just kind of block in some of these colors a little bit. Maybe tone it down just a bit more. Let's say, oh, let's see, maybe around here. Can start getting in some of the coloring for that. Just filling in the areas where I have it sketched out. And then eventually I'll go over with the highlights, add a little interest to it in that way. Use a little darker color, take a little alizarin crimson to tone that down, and then some raw umber dark, the more alizarin crimson. And we'll go into this area here, just a little deeper tone. That's a nice pretty color. That'll give us a little differentiation from the rest. Just kind of leave that right there, like that. And maybe just a little bit of alizarin crimson on the edge, a little bit of yellow, warm it up. Just kind of blend right in. This is where the light is hitting in, so we want to get that suggested a little bit. And then get some white going again. So take the titanium white, and we'll get a few highlights going for the basket itself. I mean, for the loaves. So mix yellow ochre and white, Indian yellow. Kind of a nice little cream color. We'll just go right in here, start blocking some of the colors in for that. Maybe a little more yellow ochre and Indian yellow. Something that's a nice strong tone to it. And we'll add some highlights in here as well. Maybe have another smaller illuminated area right there. And maybe add one more, suggest there's one more loaf. Since there were supposed to be 5, probably be good to suggest that. And we'll get a little striation going down here, and then something right there. I suggest that we have a strong shadow going across. And let's wipe a little of the paint off, and I'm going to see if I can make this mostly just pure white. And then we'll add a little highlight to the basket itself, right up in here. Just as if we have something going on there. Light hitting the towel. And then let's add a highlight right in here as well. Suggest the faint outline of the light hitting the towel. have some light on the fish, do that as well. And a little bit of light on the basket. Get a little stronger orangish color on the other side for this area. And maybe a little bit of burnt sienna, tone it down, and we'll add that down here. Just a bit of white to brighten it up though. Add it right in here. Get some of those little textures of the weaving of the basket. And then some white, mix them with the yellow. And Father, I pray you bless this painting, help me to finish it well. Do it with excellence in Jesus' name for the client, and that be a blessing to the people that read that book. And just help me to finish this well in Jesus' name. Amen. I forgot to pray before I started, so I just figured I'd do that right now. I do like to pray God would help me in my work, because I know I can't do it by myself. Okay. Now we'll go back in and we will add some more darker values, contrasting values to the rest. I think I wanted to go in and maybe add, well, let's see, I'll take a little of this blue and raw or umber dark. But let's add a little bit here. I forgot to add this little divot in there for the towel. So do that right now. And just paint this kind of loose, let the brush dangle across. Just let it kind of do its thing. Now we'll get some nice dark values for the fish and that area in shadow. We got umber dark, blue, and a little white to tone it down. And a little alizarin crimson, so it doesn't end up looking green. Kind of a violet color, indigo. We'll just go in and suggest the shadows here on the fish. So a little shadow in here as well, and I want to capture that. Interesting little area where the towel folds over onto the texture of the fish's body. Okay, let's see where I want this other fish to end up. Make sure it's going as far as it should. And then take a little brown. We'll just kind of work out of that a bit. Mix a little bit of burnt sienna with it, umber dark. A nice little color in between the two, and we'll work into the loaves area. Let's see, to get the dimension here, I have to make sure that I have these shadows doing the right thing. Maybe I didn't want that one right there. Try and paint that out a little bit. Wipe that off. Get some more of the other color loaded on the brush. And we'll get a little definition here. Some of these shadows defined a little more. Let's make them a little bit cooler in color. Since it is in shadow. Get some secondary lighting in there. There we go. Now I want to work on this basket area. So get some color in here that'll work for it. A little bit of raw sienna yellow ochre across. Now let's add some, maybe a little more of a golden brown tone. Yellow, Indian yellow, and a little alizarin crimson. And then what we'll do is we'll go into this area, maybe lighten it up just a bit. And we'll just work over on this side. Enrich that a little bit of burnt sienna. Add some textural areas there. Let's add some that same color and integrate it into the loaves a bit. Get some of those little burnt areas on the loaf. They're kind of nice. Let's do a little bit of coloring for the other side, for the shadow side here. It has an interesting color profile. Then I'm going to add some color in below on the fish Maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson. Make it slightly pinker on the bottom there. So you've got a little more alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. A little bit to define the top. And let's add a little bit of the blue in here, this light blue. We lighten it a little bit more. And we'll darken it just in a few areas. There we go. It's starting to look a little more like a fish. And blue and over in here on the second fish. And then a little more of a yellow color. Let's lighten it up. And add a little bit of yellow to that. A little more, a little lighter yet. Add some of that over here as well. We'll have to add in the eye. For now, that should work pretty well. I see that the loaf will probably go over a little bit further on this side. So let's do that. Just extend that over a little bit. And I'll take a small narrow brush here, round, and we'll get in a little bit of separation between the loaf and the cloth here that's in the basket. Feather that out a little bit. Add some alizarin crimson just to get a little more of a violet color. Get some of those wrinkles in there too. So I do see that being described by the colors and values that we have. Okay. Take some of that same color over here, work it into the edge of the cloth. I'm going to spray the palette just so it doesn't dry up. See if we can get a little blending going on in here. Suggest some wrinkles. Lighten that up a little to blend it into the existing color. Okay, now pause this for a moment. Okay, and let's add some color here to the bottom of the basket. Use some burnt sienna, raw sienna, and a little bit of white. Maybe a little raw umber dark. For some variety, we'll go right in there. And let's get the color darkened because this is in shadow. Scrub that right into the surface. Get a little lighter on this side. Different colors in there. And let's get it substantially lighter on the right side where the light's hitting it. A little bit of Indian yellow, raw sienna to tone it down, and then white. It's not too intense. Just go right along the edge here. And we get a little texture in here as well. Just that this has a nice bottom to it. A nice little area that's bright. Here. This suggests that we have some little divots where light is showing through. Just right in here somewhere. I can get it light enough. Have some of those different lighting effects, even on the fish. We should have a nice strong shadow going that way on the fish. Suggest I'm going to reiterate this shadow here that should be going over the fish. There we go. Just suggest that that's very, very bright. We get a little texture on this crease. Maybe a little bit of light there where the eye might be. Just kind of suggest the eye in there. And put a little shadow right in here. I suggest the eye on the other fish right in here. Get a few nuances over on his face a little bit. And darken this shadow. And the light's just hitting that. Let's darken that a little more. A little bit of raw umber dark in there to really darken it the way it should be. A little bit of blue as well. Alizarin crimson. Get just a few darker spots within little more separation. Blue in there, darken it, and then we have a little lighter color just along this part of the fish. Well, take a little bit of pinkish tone and tone that down a little bit. But seems like that's darker right up here above. All right. So now we'll continue refining some of the details, getting some more of the highlights to pop out and different things. And just keep adding. Just keep adding a little here and a little there. A little alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. Just add some nuances to the bottom of the fish. Use a little more intense alizarin crimson and burnt sienna mix. Just in this area. Let's lighten this up a little bit, and this should be a little cooler in tone, so I'm kind of mixing a few different things together. Mix these together and get a little gradation going. A darker spot in there correspond to a certain area in the fish. A little bit of this redder color just in one little spot. All right. Go with some white again, a little bit of Indian yellow, maybe the yellow ochre, and get a little highlight going on in this part. Just in this part of the fish. strengthen the highlights that I have. We'll kind of blend this out. Slightly different color. Let's make sure I have the shadow refined and defined the way it should be. A few different highlights in here. We use kind of a lighter pink color, and we just touch a few dabs in there. Suggest that the holes in the basket are leaving some highlights in the fish as well. Use just a few different varieties of colors here. Don't want to overdo that though. Grab a little more alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. Have a nice tone to kind of blend these two together. Soften the edge of this a little bit, this shadow on the fish. Just a little bit. A little more of the blue in there. We'll take some of the white and get a highlight going on. I'm going to take a little of the other color here and get that in just on the top. All right, and something I wanted to fix here on the fish. I think this might be a little too defined. I want to make it look like he's smiling or something. Just fade that off a little bit. But what I'd like to do is darken the area below here So I'm going to use a wider brush for that. And let's see, take some blue. I think I'm going to put this back in my palette from before. Take the old foil from the previous color, put it back on, and just go in and darken an area in here. A little bit of blue as well. Kind of a nice bluish color going on. Shadows look nice with blue. And we'll mix some different things in there too as well. We have some sort of a shadow that you can see somewhere in here. Medium to thin that out. Squirt it right on top of the color. Just kind of spread this over. And the shadow goes maybe, up to about here. Something like that. And a little shadow in this spot as well. All right. And I tell you what, let's add a little bit of that in the background just to tie it in. Say there's some little textural areas in the grass that the sun's not hitting and creating some shadows. And we'll just kind of work that right back in. Just in a few different spots. And maybe one or two up in here. And we'll go back in with some more of the greenish tone. Kind of blend the two together a little bit. But you know, it's nice to use a cooler color for the shadows. It really works well. All right. Take some raw sienna, a little Ombre Dark, or sienna even, just a bit. Kind of put that in a couple of the shadowed areas. Just to suggest that there's also some earth in there too. Maybe something a little lighter. Some more medium to thin this out. Get some different colors and things up the top. There's a wider brush up there. Kind of lock it in a little bit more that way. Make it somewhat more abstracted. And just have fun with this. Get some brush strokes going in different directions away from the basket to kind of separate it a little bit from the background. And put a couple more shadows in here. I didn't think I could be done all in one layer on that. Takes a few more layers sometimes to really make it work. All right. A few areas of ground, earth, whatever you want to call it. I'll add some slightly lighter colors as we get to the top while it's still wet. So we'll use some yellow ochre, a little raw sienna, and some Indian yellow. And we'll put a little medium on it to thin it out. Just kind of go into some of these areas. So we have a little bit of sunlight glistening on there or something. So just pretend that the grass has some highlights on it. Lighter color up in the corner, just to give it a little visual interest. I want it to get a little more yellow as it gets light. Easy enough to overdo it, though. Don't want to overdo it. Just having a little fun with this. This is way, way different than I usually paint. I'm kind of enjoying it. Just making it a little more painterly. Get something a little more intense right in here. Say it's poking out behind the basket. We have a few blades of grass or something. And just so you know, we're looking at grass. Add just a little bit of this to the bottom. And we'll tone it down a little bit more. So that looks like there is a highlight down here. Using a very wide brush for this, just to have a little fun. Get a few defined edges here. And a little more, say, alizarin crimson to tone this down. Or sienna. Or sorry, Umber dark. Just go over this area a little bit more. And a little darker pocket in there. Just have something a little dark just right up here. Just don't want to overdo it. We don't want to overdo too much. Just a little separation, but if you want to have a few tie-ins, tie it to the other colors. We don't want the basket to look like it's just separating in space. Include a few highlights just so that it does look like it's sitting there. Okay, I'll add a few more nuances to the shadows at the bottom. Use Umber Dark and this blue and a little bit of alizarin crimson. More blue, and just darken below a little bit more. Get some different textures in there. And we have some grass, fun things growing on the bottom. There we go. Maybe pretend there's a blade of grass growing in there. That'll kind of put it in the right spot where it should be. Make it look like it's not floating. A little leaf or something. And we have a leaf too, kind of going up in a few areas. And all right. Now, keep adding a few more nuances here and there. I'm going to switch off on this aluminum foil. I'll pause it for a moment. Okay, I'm just going to cut in on the top a little bit. And I want to refine this edge. Not have it go up quite so high. Just so I can get a little more separation between the basket edge and the loaves edge. All right, now go in and add a little more color to the bottom of the basket. I'll take some burnt sienna, raw sienna, a little bit of white, and raw umber dark. Just add a little bit of texture in the bottom. More shadows and that kind of thing. I think it's even more intense in color. So I'll add more of the burnt sienna and the raw sienna mix. A little bit of white though to give it enough luminosity. Get a little tie-in between the grass color and the basket color. Something a little stronger, just along the edge. Go. And a little more yellow ochre just along the edge here. Maybe a little more Indian yellow as well. We'll get some highlights on the edge. And clean off my brush a little bit. Grab some white, Indian yellow. We'll just add some highlights here to the top. If I use a little bit of raw sienna and Indian yellow together, that'll make a really nice golden yellow that I can use for the edge of the basket. Let's fade that to a brighter white on the top. Just a little bit of texture there. Maybe a little more Indian yellow and white. Now we'll get this golden tone. Oops. Indian yellow and just along the edge. Down here on the other side. So that's also getting quite a bit of light. Don't want it to be too intense, just enough. We'll kind of mix that into this color over here. Just we have some striations going on. Just a few of these little striations, part of the way that handle is woven. It's a secondary light source on this side of the handle coming from the flatbread and the basket, so I want to suggest that. Yeah, we don't want to lose that nice definition we had on the top there. A little cooler tone on the top here. Maybe a bit of blue and alizarin crimson. Kind of mix them together. It's probably getting a little bit from the sky. A bit of the sky color kind of mixing in, reflecting on it. Okay, that's not bad. Just kind of darken it on the edge. All right. Pause it for a moment. Okay, we're going to do a little more work on the towels and stuff here, the cloth. Take some of this blue color, tone it down a little bit. Some brown, which is a complementary color, and that's very important. Toning it down, and then see what we have here. Sometimes you have to play around with the color and see what works, and so I'd like to do. I'll add a little more alizarin crimson to this. This is in shadow, so it should be significantly darker than the rest. Add a few nuances. A little brown to tone it down a bit more. A bit of blue. Umber dark again. There's alizarin crimson. Go in and get some of these shadowed areas in once more. Let's get a little bit of variety from the colors here. Work on the other side now, which is a little bit lighter, maybe a little bluer in tone rather than violet in tone. So, show you what I'm mixing here. Just something that's a little bit more blue on that. And I need to lighten it up so it matches the value a bit more. And then we'll add some more white and some more blue. Maybe just quite a bit more blue. Make that interesting. Okay. bring the sheet down just a bit. The cloth, rather. I'm going to clarify here. I'm going to bring this edge of the sheet down, the cloth down just a bit, so that the fish looks a little bit lower. You can see a little more of the fish. It should help get the roundness of the basket suggested more. Whoops, just got a little bit of water in there. So I forgot to dry off my brush all the way. No worries. And I might have to go back and push it in the other direction. I think I went down a little too low. So here we go. Get a little highlight going on in here, here. And I'll lower the top of it just a bit more with a dark color like raw umber dark and ultramarine blue. A bit of alizarin crimson. And we'll go in and darken. And with that, lower down that cloth just a little bit. Get a little more of this blue color right in here. Just get a little bit of blending going on, a little gradation. And it looks like there's just a little shadowing right here. And right in here. There's a little bit of a shadow too. Right across here. I'll make sure I have the right color for this. It was something kind of neutral at first. There we go. Now get a little, just a little blue on this side. I think there might be a little bit right there. There's a shadow. I want to continue, get some white and different colors together. We'll just highlight right in here, suggesting the cloth goes a little further. Get a little color from these two going together. A little bit of a tie-in color. Maybe just a bit of alizarin crimson. No burnt sienna, I think, might work. Something to tie them together nicely. Nice white color. We want to strengthen the highlights here. The edge. That's where we know there would be a strong highlight. I want to use pure white, but white with a little bit of yellow. I need to rinse off my brush a bit. A little bit of texture in this area. Also add more highlight again to this side. Kind of just fade it out to the edge. Using a little bit of warmer tones just on the transition between your shadow and your highlight really helps to make it pop. Gives it a certain luminosity. So I really like to do that when I can. All right. Okay, I'm just going to do a little bit more right in here on the bread. Okay, just move the camera over a little bit to get it closer in. And so what I'm going to do is work on the bread and refine the highlights a little bit. So we'll take some white and Indian yellow, and we'll just go in the top, get a little separation between the bread and the basket and the background. We get a little more texture in here. And it will require just a couple other colors. There's a shadow in here somewhere. Should capture that. And we have this highlight here, and that's a little brighter. And let's wipe this off. There's also a little more of this yellow and white mix. I'll add a little highlight right in here. Soft brush. So a little bit of yellow, white, and we'll strengthen the highlights in here so that the shadow can be made a little stronger with that. I'm going to just bring this all the way down, and I'll go back in with a darker color to get the shadows in again. Put them in a different spot. We'll just put in the shadow maybe about there. Oh, a little bit of too much water on the brush again. I'll just say there's a shadow in the center, but I'll use a little different color for that. All right. Just yellow to this. Maybe a little more yellow and raw sienna. Add some to the edge here as well. And a little bit in here. Oh, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna and raw sienna. So add some white and Indian yellow. Just kind of go right on top here. Suggest that we have the shadow going over this part of the bread. Get a little more depth in that way. And a little separation between the bread and the cloth of the basket. Just go over it with this slightly cooler color to reiterate the shadows a little more. And take a little bit of the blue. Oops, a little too much. I'll have to tone that down. What I wanted to do is just add a little of that bluer color to the top of the bread a bit. Maybe a bit of alizarin crimson as well. So it's not too strong. Okay, let's take some burnt sienna, a little bit of raw sienna. And what we'll do is we'll add a couple spots. It might be a little too much. Add a few spots with a little white to make it cover better. Just a couple of those burnt areas of the bread. Kind of neat. We'll have just a few highlights right in here too. On the top. Maybe take some of this warmer color and just kind of work it into the other area on the top. A few more of those little burnt areas. And darken this with a little bit of umber dark, and then we'll go into this area along the edge to get a little bit of depth. Work our way out from that. Warm it up a little bit. I want to get a little gradation, some shading between this edge and then into the rest of that flatbread. By the way, I actually went to the store, if you haven't heard this story already, and bought the fish in the flatbread when I took the photograph for the reference, just so I could get it realistic. And then I ate the fish later that night. Worked out pretty well. The sun was just setting, so it created some really interesting lighting and some just nice highlights and values that really showed off the shapes of the bread and the fish and made it very sculptural, and just worked out perfectly. I did a painting from this called Multiplied Unto Many, which is a 16 by 20 acrylic on canvas in the glazing technique. And this one here is a 12 by 16. I'm not sure what I'll call it yet, but it's also going to be for a book cover illustration, like I mentioned. Yeah, this is fun. Just wanting to smooth out some of these areas. A little bit of different textures, wrinkles of the bread, without overdoing it. Let's get some values in here that kind of tie everything together a little more too. A couple of shadows in here. Just make that kind of a lighter color. I don't want to overdo that. Sometimes there's a little mystery in defining your shapes, and you don't want to define them by line, but more by value. So it's nice to have a little bit of mystery in there sometimes. Just suggest there's maybe one more fish or one more loaf hiding back here. Let's see if that went along. All right. Possible I have a little too much gradation right here. Make it look like the bread is shiny instead of flat in color. So go over this a little more. Get a little bit of the bluer color worked in, as if it's picking up some of the color from the sky. And maybe a little highlight or something right in here with yellow. Define the background a little bit more. Go in there with the background color and define the background and the edge of the flatbread with that. All right. The shadow here is a little too dark. I'll need to tone that down just a bit. Let's add a little bit of burnt sienna to it. I need to make sure that I have the shadow distinguished from the actual edge of the flatbread. So this is the shadow. Now, helps give it the proper dimension, and then I'm going to go back in with the highlight color of white and Indian yellow. We'll see, can give that more dimension on the other side. Let's go right in there, that bright color. Starting to want to mix a little bit, so we get a little bit thicker. A little bit of highlights here. Fortunately, I'm having some water mix into the brush. Get a little blue in between the two so you can see the edge of that towel behind it. Gives it a little separation that way. Let's go like that. Whoops. Realize I just got some paint there. I want to darken the edge there a little more on that cloth. use a little bit of alizarin crimson here. And do a little shading in here. A bit of white. Soften that up and get some gradation between the two. Pretend we have a couple of wrinkles in here as well. Edge to that cloth down in here. Let's get a little lighter color on this side. A bit of alizarin crimson. And let's warm it up just a bit. Lighten it, warm it up. Now let's make this a little more blue. Just in this spot. A little darken it, go with a little darker blue. A little bit of alizarin crimson again. Just get a bit of a highlight in there, or shadow rather. Let this kind of fade. Move the color. A little more alizarin crimson again. Now, edge might be a little too dark. I'll have to go over that. Soften that up a little bit. Alizarin crimson and burnt sienna. And let's add just a slightly warmer tone just on the edge. As we go in and transition between these two colors. But I'll go in with a smaller brush and a little bit of white. Take some white and Indian yellow. Go right over the edge here. Maybe not quite so much Indian yellow, just a little more straight white. Just over that spot. We had a couple highlights right on the top of the basket. And we'll get a little more on this side as well. Highlight right along the edge of the fish, the flatbread. Oops, that's not good. Rest your hand on the canvas when it's wet like that. So I'll have to fix that up. And, that's something kind of the other direction here. All right, now let's keep going here. Okay, and let me work a little more on the shadows on the cloth, just to clarify that a bit. Make sure I have the gradation the way I'd like it. A few highlights just in the bottom there. And I'd like to do alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, white, more burnt sienna, and just get a few little tie-in colors between that blue and orangish color. Let's see, a little bit of raw sienna. I just want to tie those two together. But let's add a little more blue to it. Don't want to overdo it. Shadow right in the inside. Make sure we have the right color for that, though. And a little more white on the outside. And then let's get a little bit of texture just in the fish. A little bit of white and yellow. whatever works for that. So even a little bit of Indian yellow. I'd like to strengthen the highlights on the fish on the top. So we'll use white and Indian yellow. That. Go right over top. See if we can bring that closer, just to straight white. A little highlight right here. Get that nice and defined. Maybe just a bit of a golden tone right along the edge. Give it a little luminosity there. Do the same thing down here, just a little bit. Just a few textures inside here, like some scale textures. Just define the edge of the fish a little bit. Use a little bit of the color there to illuminate part of his eye. Textures inside. We'll add just a little bit in there. And unfortunately, I'm getting some paint on. I have to fix that up a little bit. I'll need a smaller brush. Get the little detail I want in the eye. This is why I don't like to paint in oil. Way too easy to smear things up. Okay. I want to darken by that fish's eye a little bit more. right in there. Darken inside that eye a little more. We'll add a little more in here. Might be almost time to call this painting done because I'm starting to mess up a couple of areas as I'm working on it. It does happen from time to time, but I think mostly it's because I have a little paint on my hand that gets smeared on it as I'm leaning my hand on the canvas. Okay, a little alizarin crimson, umber dark, some matte medium to make this flow easier. And a bit of burnt sienna. Just kind of blend that out. A few shadows underneath here. Set that little spot. That paint on it. We'll add some more blue, alizarin crimson. Just darken up under here a little bit. Get the edge of that fish defined just a bit more with that. A little more alizarin crimson. I'd like to darken a certain area on the basket. And we'll use some burnt sienna and just a few little details. I want to use a larger brush just to keep the abstraction. So lighter color. here. But let's use some burnt sienna. And we'll get a little bit of shadows going on in this area. Define that properly. And we'll just pretend we can see underneath here that this handle's casting a little shadow on the rest of it. Put a little more right in this area of the fish. Another little nuance right there. There we go. And just so we can say there's a gill right there. Gives it a little bit more variety. Now, let's add a little bit for under the shadows here to give some separation between the grass and the edge of the cloth. Just a little bit of blue in here. Let's give it a little variety. Let's just separate this a little bit more. More alizarin crimson there. A little separation between the edge of the basket and the cloth. Maybe not that much. do a little more over here on the edge of the basket. And we'll just finish this right up. Maybe add a few highlights to the top with a little bit of white and Indian yellow. A little mixture of some other colors in there. Just kind of cut into this a little bit. Find that a bit more. A little separation here between the edge of the basket and the blue. A little darker just at the bottom. A little bit of extra values in here and different things going on. Just to tie in the value of the basket with the rest of it. you the basket sounds like some sort of a fast food menu item. All right. Just a little bit stronger color in a few areas. Kind of interesting. A couple more details to these spots on bread. Soften it up just a bit. I'm just going to get in here and define this edge a little bit more. All right, and I think I will call this done and just sign it, and we'll call it good. All right, now I'll sign this. Just using the color that's similar to the basket. Integrate everything together. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this video here. I record in the way, but hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, be sure to subscribe to my art updates at mattphilleo.com. And also you can subscribe to this YouTube channel where I'm doing more art instruction videos just like this, taking you into the studio and watching over my shoulder as I paint. And I'd love to keep in touch with you. If you have any questions, let me know. I teach online art classes as well, realistic acrylic portrait school, and looking forward to teaching you some techniques and help you in your acrylic painting. So God bless and have a great day.